Pikachu and I debunked the arguments against Dragon Drive before the hate even got off the ground. I was there like, day zero, release date at midnight, playing the game, released a statement saying, yeah, it's really good, really, really good, signed off for the night, and then spent the next following day just playing this game regularly and enjoying this absolute masterpiece of a motion controlled sports game. Right, Dragon Drive is one of the best games on Nintendo Switch 2 right now, and of course that's saying quite a lot considering it's going up against Game of the Year contenders like Donkey Kong Bonanza and Mario Kart World. But as everyone predicted, YouTubers and pretendos are coming out in full force, trying to talk down about Dragon Drive, trying to say this game is like some huge unprecedented disaster, and a lot of it I've already debunked in my video. There's a lot of it are things I've already addressed and called out and debunked and just did all that already. But I watched Arlo's video today and I was completely taken aback, completely shocked by the sheer audacity of this man's statements and his claims. And I cannot reiterate enough, you cannot trust a Muppet. So let's get right into it.
We did it, Eli. Put it there. Put it there, bro. Hey, here we go. Lay it on me, big guy. Don't leave a monster hanging. Double high five.
Arlo, you idiot. When a character is looking at the screen, that means he's cycling through the menus. So the reason why that guy wasn't giving you a high five is because he was adjusting his character class or adjusting his customization options or looking at the game. That was why he wasn't moving.
That April Switch 2 Direct had so much cool stuff in it. It's just like, it's open world Mario Kart, it's humongous 3D DK. All these games are just like the absolute craziest next-gen Nintendo games ever. And then in the middle of all of it was Dragon Drive. And it was just so... Why? Just why? I've just grown so tired of motion-controlled gimmick games. And I think most people have. They don't even tend to sell very well anymore, but Nintendo keeps doing them, even way back on the original Switch.
They don't sell anymore? Like, Nintendo Switch Sports sold over 10 million units. ARM sold 3 million units. Like, 1-2 Switch sold 4 million. Like, what are you talking about when you say these games don't sell? You can see Dragon Drive is on the bestsellers page right now. I was told it cracked the top 6. I haven't checked myself, but, it's up there. The idea that these games don't sell is completely wrong.
8 years ago, even then, 1-2 Switch and ARMS, I thought we left this behind. I thought we finished this whole arc on the Wii. So now here, in the space age year of 2025, we got another one. The Switch 2 has its own ARMS, except here's the catch. This one looks even more tedious than ever, even more unnecessary. And then you add the...
Unnecessary? What is he talking about? Like, ARMS was a new IP. It was a completely new, fresh, original thing from Nintendo. How dare Nintendo put out a new IP? Like, I don't know where he's going with this, but, like, I really have to emphasize just how insane this is. That he's seriously sitting there complaining about the concept of motion-controlled games. Like, oh, we should have left that behind in the Wii era. Like, what are you talking about? Motion controls have never gone anywhere. They've been integrated into every Nintendo console since the Wii. Even the 3DS had the gyro. This idea that, like, motion controls were a gimmick that just faded away and that nobody cares about it anymore, that is very observably not true. And yet millennials, the boomers of our generation, they keep doing this thing where they're just like, oh, I'd rather play with buttons. Like, come on.
Super duper bland visual style on top of it. I mean, you've got a game. I don't think Nintendo has put out a game that looked this unappealing to me since I don't even know when. Just not appealing in the slightest. So I don't want to say that I went into it ready to hate it. I really do want to give every game that I play a fair shot. I don't want to be pre-biased and then that like makes me hate it. But I did not expect to like it. And I will say, the start was a little bit rough. Playing that tutorial, yeah, it's a little exhausting. Covering a lot of ground, like trying to go fast for long distances, it really does take a lot of arm movement. Like really big, consistent motions.
All right, guys, time to play some Dragon Drive. I can't play anymore. I'm completely out of breath. Moving my arms, it's too much effort. Come on, Arlo. What are you talking about? Oh man, it's too much effort to wave my arms around. It's too much effort to push the Joy-Cons against my leg. What are you talking about? How out of shape are you, bro? Like, you're getting tired by moving a video game controller. You are claiming that you get fatigued by playing Dragon Drive.
With the arms, and like it's dual mouse mode. It's not really gonna be convenient at the best of times. If you want to play tabletop or something, or like use your coffee table, you could like use a hard surface, but then you kind of got to be right up to it. You can use your legs. I used my legs with decent results. But it really is a commitment. It really is weird. It really does take a lot of movement. And yet, I have to say, somehow, against all odds, the gameplay kinda grew on me. I really don't know how it happened. And like, arms really wasn't my cup of tea, but I could still see that it probably was a really like deep and satisfying experience if you could manage to master the controls. I could really see that there was a lot of nuance and flexibility there. And this really does feel the same to me. It really does feel like there's probably a pretty high skill ceiling. And I know that I will never play the game enough to like actually get really good at it, especially because I am overall just not good at competitive multiplayer games. I never played them enough. It's just not ever gonna be a thing. But I was able to stick with the game enough to actually grow my skill and start to kind of catch on to how the gameplay works, and I found it a lot more satisfying than I expected. I actually enjoyed the process of picking up those skills and getting better and better at it, like, just so much more than I thought I would. I kind of figured that this is a game that probably exists purely for the gimmicky controls. Like, they absolutely could have let us use a regular controller. There's no reason why we couldn't.
Except for the fact the entire game revolves around the motion controls. You can realistically wave your arms around. You can choose to shoot with your left or right hand. You wheel around realistic. Like, oh, you could use another control system for it. No, you really can't. This is a game that is designed specifically around the motion controls. And the fact that people like Arlo sit there and insist that, like, well, you could map it to a button if you want, like, you are completely missing the point of what they were trying to do with this game.
Couldn't have. But then, of course, almost no one would use the motion controls. They would just use the controller, and then that would have kind of revealed how uninspired the gameplay is otherwise, because it is pretty simplistic. It really is just basketball, but you're wheeling around. That probably is true. Without the motion controls, the game might not really be worth engaging with much at all. But whereas I originally thought that that was a mark against the game and kind of made me think, well, then what's the point? That means that this exists as nothing more than just a showcase for mouse controls. Now that I've gotten my hands on it, it is a lot easier for me to see how the, forced motion controls actually do kind of create a unique experience that is fun in its own way. The kind of thing that just would not exist.
What's with all these backhanded compliments? He's sitting there like complaining about the motion controls, calling them forced, and then he has to acknowledge that, like, well, the motion controls are what makes the game interesting. So compliment the motion controls. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I really do feel like a lot of millennials, like, really got it in their heads that, like, motion controls were inherently bad. Remember back in the 2000s when, like, every Wii game was, like, derided as having, like, waggle controls? Like, even though, like, all of them are very smooth and intuitive and way better than what we were getting on PlayStation 360 and PC, like, it's like that. Like, that is this is an extension of that mindset. Arlo is not capable of acknowledging that motion controls have evolved. He's not acknowledging that they are being used in modern games, and he's not acknowledging that they are being used to great effect in Drag and Drive, to the point where he straight up thinks that, like, having a standard control setup would be viable for this game, when anybody who's engaged with it at all will tell you that that is not the case whatsoever.
Otherwise, motion controls introduce an immersion factor into a game, and that's why I really, really liked them at first, but then over time, I got tired of it. I just didn't care as much. I haven't really cared about them that much outside of, like, very practical scenarios, like motion aiming. Motion aiming, that's not a gimmick. That is purely functional. But, like, waggle, kind of like imagining that I'm actually doing the thing, swinging the thing, I haven't cared about that in so long. This is really the first time that I kind of have in probably a lot of years. Like, it really is just oddly compelling how the game feels when you start to get it down, when you're making all these finer maneuvers by sliding the Joy-Cons around, and you're spinning around in your chair, but then just learning how it works and learning how to turn accurately and build up speed quickly. And then even the act of lifting my hand to shoot the ball. I really did not anticipate that I would care about that at all, but even that does kind of feel good. Also, slam dunking, I am so bad at it, I can barely ever pull it off. But when I do, it is an ecstatic experience. Dunking the ball by actually moving your arm, it does something to your brain. Some neurochemical thing. It's like 100 times more satisfying than if you just did it with a button. It's just so funny. I started out so skeptical, so expecting to not enjoy this and just to see it as, like, purely tedious, and yet my enjoyment just grew so steadily, really slowly, but really steadily. It just got more and more and more fun the more I played. Really though, it's not just the gameplay. The gameplay all by itself, even if I did come to appreciate it more over time, I think that probably still wouldn't quite be enough to carry the game for me by itself. What made the game grow on me more than anything was its personality. Now, I know that's weird to say. What personality, you might be thinking? That's the whole thing with this game. It's completely bland. There's no personality at all. Okay, well, you're not wrong that the visual style is rather bland. It looks like a launch game for the original Xbox. It's got such like a 2001 vibe. They're really just generic robot people. There's really not much to it. On that front, I will at least say that it's not quite as bland in action when you're actually playing it and kind of getting into, like, the cosmetics and stuff. Like, you can customize it a little bit. You can add some color in there. Yeah, it may be plain, but it's not entirely uninteresting, I think. What gives it personality is all of the stuff you can do with your arms, using the Joy-Cons, using the motion controls, not just sliding around to make the chair move, but, like, your arms. They track, like, all the time, pretty much no matter what you're doing. So you can gesture, you can point, you can, like, clap and high-five each other. Whenever you start a match, you can do, like, whatever you want, so everyone's all dancing around and doing all this silly stuff. It's like, even if the game itself doesn't have a lot of personality, especially, like, in its aesthetic style, it lets the player put in a lot of their own personality. You get to inject your own into the game. And man, the whole lobby system is actually really cool. I was kind of surprised here. It puts a big group of people together and you all just kind of hang out. You can opt to be included in matchmaking if you want. You can choose if you want to get in on the in-between match mini games. So it'll select from this group of people, and when you're not in a match, you just cruise around and do little challenges, kind of peppered around, little obstacle courses you can practice. And when everyone else is in a match, you can just watch them. Like, you just sit there on the sidelines and watch in real time, and it's all like totally seamless. Like, you're dropping in and out of these matches really easily, really quickly, and the whole time you're just messing around, just doing all this silly stuff. There's just such a surprising sense of camaraderie here. It genuinely feels like you're hanging out with a bunch of people, especially if you're using game chat to do it with friends. I don't know, it really does add a lot to the fun. Now, it is absolutely true that there is not a lot of content in this game per se. There's no ranking system, there's no real progression system, there's no real single-player content, like, at all, beyond doing these little challenges and trying to get good scores. And online options are sorely lacking, as with just about all Nintendo games. You can't play alongside a friend against randos. Fortunately, in my experience, if you've got a friend who's on, it'll usually put them in your room, at least, so you can't choose to team up with them every time, but you'll still play together a lot. So it's not so bad. I mean, obviously, we really should have the choice, and there isn't even local multiplayer, so playing against people online with no real progression system, no ranking, no anything, nothing really beyond like a few cosmetic unlocks that you can get eventually. That's really the best you can get. Otherwise, you just play in matches. That's it. And that leads us to the big problem with Dragon Drive. It's just so incredibly, unabashedly niche. I think even Nintendo could tell that this was not going to be a big hit. It was just a fun little thing that they wanted to do because they feel like required to make games using their controller gimmicks. So they gave the project to a super small team, and they clearly didn't spend a lot of money on it. If they had given it more features, all the proper online accoutrements, they would probably want to charge more. So they kept it simple, but because of that, now it appeals to even fewer people. I mean, you take the whole Switch 2 playing population, narrow it down to people who like this kind of competitive online sports game, then narrow it down more to people who like motion-controlled games, and then narrow it down to the people who are willing to play this kind of motion-controlled game, which requires kind of a weird setup and a lot of, like, arm energy. And then you just have to hope that the game offers enough feature-wise to keep even those people occupied, or to make them even willing to spend money on it at all. That's why it really should have just been free to play. It really should have. Or, like, free for NSO members.
It's $20. Like, how much cheaper do you want? Like, Rocket League was initially sold for $20. It became free to play eventually after the whole fad died, but at launch, Rocket League was being sold for $20. So, like, Dragon Drive launches at $20, and all the YouTubers and the shills, the people who have spent like the past year complaining about the price points for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, the Switch 2 in general, right? The console, $450. These people who have been complaining about games being too expensive are still complaining about how $20 is too much and that they should have just gotten it for free. This really is the same argument that they gave to Welcome Tour. Never mind that it's $10 and that's nothing. Never mind all that. Like, oh, hey, that should have been bundled in. It is a gigantic cope, and I do think this needs to be called out more, right? Because I'm old enough where I remember people complaining about virtual console games being overpriced. Those were like $8 back in the day, and everybody was insisting that was too much and that they wouldn't pay for it because like people in the online gaming community were pirating all their games, right? And you see that now with the NSO thing, like people are like insisting that they don't need that either, like, again, it doesn't matter how low the price point is. The general YouTube audience, people like Arlo, are going to complain it's too expensive no matter how budget it is. Like Drag and Drive is a very, very good example of that. $20 for this is perfectly reasonable.
Or even just expansion pack members, or something. A multiplayer game lives and dies by its player base. By charging anything at all, even a small amount, they are cutting even more into this potential market. It feels a little weird to push for a game to be free to play. It's actually great that Nintendo is still willing to do smaller games and just charge money for them straight up. But I just think it would have made all the sense in the world here. Even if we had to pay for some content, even if it was just like free to start, or heck, even if they had charged for some cosmetics. I'm not generally into that kind of thing, and yet I could kind of see it here. It's just such a weird little game, and getting it into the hands of more people would have really, really helped because, yeah, again, look at me. I was 100,000% skeptical, and yet even I warmed up to it. I just kind of had to work with it a little bit. But instead, it's $20, and $20 really isn't a lot. I mean, especially in this day and age, you know, Nintendo's like quote-unquote budget games have been like $50, you know, last generation. So a $20 Nintendo game, it's almost unheard of. So if you do happen to be one of those people who do like this kind of thing, you want to really dig into the controls and master them and just kind of have some fun with friends and other people online, I think 20 is probably a decent deal, even without all the content, even in the state that it's in right now. $20, yeah, it's probably worth it, but it's still gonna be too much for most people, especially if there's no reliable way to try the game for free. So Drag and Drive really feels like it's doomed to fail. I mean, it felt like it was doomed to fail from the beginning. Like Nintendo sent.
This was made by 18 people. This is a budget game on the eShop. It's already on the bestsellers page. It did reasonably well. We really need to get out of that mindset that every game needs to sell AAA numbers, you know? Like, I imagine even like 500,000 would be good for this game, you know? Like, I imagine that it doesn't even need to be a million seller to be successful. Right, but Arlo's gonna sit here and tell you that like, oh, this is a failure. It's not gonna do well because the price point is too high, and that is completely and totally wrong. The game has done well. It is retaining its player base. Nintendo has handled the situation spectacularly, and there's not really that anything you can do to stop it.
It out to die. It was one of those projects they had to do because you have to have the thing that shows off the controllers, but is it gonna sell well? Does it really matter? Who cares? They likely knew that the game looked kind of unappealing, was probably gonna be super niche at best, but I don't know. Just throw it out there, see what happens, be done with it, move on. And I guess what I'm saying is that I think that's a little sad because I think it has the potential to be more. Not a lot more, really not a whole lot more, but at least a little more. At least something that could hang on with a small but dedicated player base for at least a bit. With just a little love, maybe just a little bit more in the way of online features, maybe a responsible free-to-play model, maybe some more flashy cosmetics. They could have a nice little game on their hands. Something that could actually thrive in its own tiny, extremely modest way. But if even big Mario sports games don't get supported after launch because Nintendo would rather move on to something else, then I guess it's the same thing here. They don't want it to be bigger. They just want to make a few bucks and be done. It's just a shame. The game's got a heck of a lot more heart than I thought it would. And to learn that it was made by 18 people, 18 people coming from Nintendo, that's really unusual. All things considered, those people actually did a really, really good job here, and they probably really care about this project and would love to see it become something at least a little bit bigger, something that can hang on a little longer, instead of it being just that weird wheelchair basketball game that everyone made fun of and then forgot about forever. I will completely admit, I'm gonna open up a little bit right now. There was a teeny tiny little part of me, a very petty, sad little part of me, but a very real part of me that was kind of hoping the game wouldn't work out. I don't like to admit it, but like, these gimmick games, are just like, why? Like, why are you still doing them? There was that tiny little part of me that expected that it was gonna fail, and then I would be like, serves you right. What are you doing making these kinds of games? I'm not happy that that little part of me existed, and yet I have to admit that it did. And now that I've played it, and I see the heart that went into it, and I see the kind of game that it could be, I'll just say I'm very surprised. I'm very, very surprised with how Dragon Drive turned out. I still don't think it's quite a game for me. It is still a competitive multiplayer game, and I am just really not into competitive multiplayer games. I probably won't be returning to this one a lot. But I did have fun with it, and at the very least, I can see that Dragon Drive is not just a gimmick. It's not just this soulless, uninspired product. It's good. I think Dragon Drive is good. Sometimes looks really, really can be very, very incredibly deceiving. Look at that. Look at us. Look at us. Look at the power of teamwork. That's not even teamwork. I'm carrying this game. Martabani, what are you doing? Uh-oh. Whoa. Oh, slightly anticlimactic.
My takeaway from this video, and the thing that I really want to emphasize going into this, is why Arlo was upset. Because he said himself, the game is good, you know, the controls are great, it's a great, unique product with a lot of personality, you know, the aesthetics are great. It's an amazing game. But what he's mad about, and what I think every single gaming YouTuber complaining about this is mad about, is that this is a lower budget game. You know, this is not the next big AAA thing from Nintendo. It's some experimental title, and as a result of that, it needs to be clowned on and rejected. You know, never mind the fact that this game clearly has an audience. Never mind that it has redeeming factors, qualities to it. Never mind that people are enjoying it. No, we have to make this out to be the worst thing ever now. It's very similar to what happened, you know, with Star Fox Zero or Tokyo Mirage Sessions or Devil's Third. Like, you know, lots of Wii U games that were like, you know, not seen as like being big AAA products were just downright disregarded by the community. And this is like cut from the same cloth. It really is. And because this is on a console, this doesn't become like a cult classic like, say, Pushmo or like Box Boy or whatever. Right? This is what happens when Nintendo puts out a budget title, is that people complain about how it's not as prestigious as the big AAA stuff. You know, we saw a lot of this with like Nintendo Switch Sports and Mario Strikers Battle League, Mario Golf Super Rush, and to a certain extent Mario Tennis Aces. Right? There's nothing wrong with any of those games, but because of their nature, because they don't have a ton of single player content, like you see a lot of people coping and seething about them, even though that they all still have extremely active online scenes. You know, all of them do. You know, I verified this myself. So, like the cope that like Arlo's coming up with, this idea that people are just gonna magically stop playing the game and you won't be able to get matches and that like it's a failure, clearly not gonna happen. Okay, like this game is going to stay fairly relevant throughout the Switch's lifespan, actually. You know, one of the big things I keep saying is that this is the new ARMS, that like ARMS came onto the scene and then it failed and then nobody plays it anymore. I've been playing ARMS throughout the Switch 1's generation, and in fact, I went back and played it again on the Switch 2, and yeah, I found matches, you know, like people are still playing that game. So the simple fact of the matter is, the entire cope that you have, you know, this idea that like these lower budget Nintendo games fail, like these new IPs, like games like this, games like ARMS, games like say Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Fire Emblem Xenoblade, like all of these like second string, like B, C, D tier list Nintendo franchises, like you do have to acknowledge that these games are finding audiences, that they are popular, that they are successful, and that like coping and seething about them every time they come out, every time they get new trailers or announcements or a new entry or like some new details emerge, like the more you do this, the more you spurg out over stuff like this, the more ridiculous you're going to look. And I think when it comes to Nintendo Switch Sports specifically, that game has gone on to be a classic. That game was wildly hated when it came out by Pretendos, and yet it went on to be this hugely monumental, like huge success story sales wise. And I imagine like 10, 15 years from now, it's going to be regarded as a favorite among people, the same way that Wii Sports Resort is today. So with that being said, yeah, Dragon Drive is a good game, and even Arlo could not deny it. But the coping and seething he has about certain like ingrained truths he has in his false truths he has in like implanted in his brain. The idea that like games need to be big budget. The idea that games need to get rid of motion controls. The idea that games like this don't matter. The idea that games like this don't sell. The idea that this game has no audience. Like all of these are just copes from the Wii era. Like they really are. This is the kind of thing that game journos were drilling into our heads in the Wii era. Arlo even used like their favorite term to downplay Wii games at the time, waggle. Like that's just the reality of this situation, is that Arlo is just reiterating arguments from the Wii era and applying it to a new Switch 2 game. Like a parrot. Like that's what he is. Squawk, squawk. Arlo wants a cracker.